They came from every corner of human space. The first to arrive after the Wanderer was a mining vessel called Sunflower. It was an ugly ship, covered in dents and burn marks from years of asteroid work. Its captain was a woman named Jisoo, who had lost her husband and daughter to a mining accident 5 years ago. The company had called it an unavoidable tragedy. They had not even paid for the funerals. Jisoo had spent every day since then looking for a reason to keep living. She found it in Taiho's message. "I have room for 300 people," she told Taiho when she landed. "Maybe 400, if they do not mind being uncomfortable. They are running from monsters that want to eat them," Taiho said. "I think they can handle uncomfortable." Next came a transport ship called the Morning Star, captained by a retired soldier named Junho. He had served in the human military for 30 years, fighting in wars that nobody remembered anymore. When he retired, the government gave him a medal and forgot about him. He spent his pension on a ship and started hauling passengers between colony worlds. "I heard your message," he told Taiho. "Made me remember why I became a soldier in the first place. Not for medals, not for governments, for people." Then came the strange ones. A luxury yacht appeared in orbit, white and gleaming like a pearl against the darkness. It belonged to a man named Minho, who had inherited more money than he could ever spend. He had wasted most of his life on parties and pleasures, always feeling empty inside. When he heard Taiho's message, something woke up in him. "I have been waiting my whole life for something worth doing," he told Taiho. "My ship can hold 200 people. I will make it hold 500. They can sleep in the ballroom." A prison transport came, crewed by guards who had released their prisoners and asked them to help. Most of the prisoners said yes. They were criminals, but they were not monsters. They knew the difference between stealing bread and letting children die. A hospital ship came, filled with doctors and nurses who had heard Hana's voice on the communication channel, talking about 52 billion patients. They could not save them all, but they could try to save some. By the end of the first day, 47 human ships orbited Velnor. By the end of the second day, the number had risen to 127. They were not warships. The human military had not come. The government had not authorized any rescue. These were just ordinary people with ordinary ships who had decided that doing nothing was not an option. Taiho stood in the cargo bay of the Wanderer, looking at a map of the planet on his screen. Yuna had calculated the numbers. 127 ships. If they packed people tight and made multiple trips, they could evacuate maybe 500,000 people. That was still 300,000 who would die. "It is not enough," he said. Yuna put her hand on his shoulder. "It is more than they had yesterday." Dongluk had been working without sleep, moving from ship to ship with other engineers, building things they had never built before. The mining ships had lasers for cutting asteroids. With some adjustment, those lasers could cut through Krath ships too. They would not win a battle, but they could buy time. "I have rigged point defense systems on 30 ships," he reported. "They will not stop the Krath, but they will slow them down." Hana was on the surface, training Velith volunteers in basic medical care. The Velith were fast learners, but they had never seen violence before. When Hana showed them how to treat wounds, some of them fainted. "They are trying," she told Taiho. "They want to help. They just do not understand what is coming." On the second night, the Galactic Confederation sent a message to all human vessels in the Veloner system. "Your presence in this sector constitutes interference with natural expansion patterns protected under Confederation law. Any hostile action against Krath forces will result in humanity's pending membership application being permanently denied. Furthermore, the Confederation disclaims all responsibility for any losses suffered by human vessels or personnel. You have been warned." Taiho read the message 3 times. Then he laughed. Natural expansion patterns, he said. They call genocide a natural expansion pattern. What are you going to do? Jisoo asked. She had come aboard the Wanderer for a captain's meeting. Taiho looked at the message again. He thought about all the things he had wanted when he was young. A safe home. A government that cared. A galaxy that made sense. He had never gotten any of those things. But he had gotten something better. He had gotten a choice. Record this, he said to Yuna. Send it to the Confederation on all channels. Yuna nodded and started recording. Taiho spoke slowly and clearly. This is Captain Taiho of the human vessel Wanderer, speaking on behalf of the human fleet at Valinor. We have received your warning. We understand the consequences. We do not care. He paused. You can keep your membership. We will keep our souls. End message. The recording went out. Within hours, it had spread across the galaxy. Species who had been Confederation members for thousands of years heard. A tiny human telling the most powerful government in existence to go away. Some of them laughed. Some of them were angry. And some of them, deep in their hearts, felt something they had not felt in a long time. Shame. On the third morning, the Krath fleet began its final approach to Valinor. The human fleet was as ready as it would ever be. Mining ships with improvised weapons floated in a defensive line. Cargo vessels waited in orbit, ready to carry refugees to safety. Medical ships prepared for casualties that everyone knew were coming. Taiho stood on the bridge of the Wanderer and looked at the approaching darkness. The Krath ships were visible now, a black cloud that seemed to eat the stars. All ships, he said into the communication channel. This is Taiho. I will not lie to you. Some of us will not survive today. Maybe most of us. But every minute we fight is another minute for evacuation. Every ship we stop is another transport that gets away. He took a deep breath. We are not soldiers. We are not heroes. We are just people who decided that doing nothing was not good enough. And that is enough. That is more than enough. Across the human fleet, men and women who had never fired a weapon prepared to die for strangers. Because humans do not leave people behind. Even when staying means dying. Even when helping means losing everything. They stay anyway. That is what makes them human. The Velith had lived among the stars for 3,000 years. They were tall and thin, with silver skin that shimmered like moonlight on water. Their eyes glowed softly in shades of blue and purple, and when they spoke, their voices sounded like music. They were a peaceful people. They built great libraries filled with the knowledge of 100 worlds. They trained the finest healers in the galaxy. They wrote poems that made other species weep with joy, but they had never learned to fight. In all their long history, the Velith had never built a single weapon. They believed that wisdom and kindness would always win against darkness. They believed that the galaxy was good. They were wrong. The Krath swarm came from the dark spaces between stars, where no light had ever reached. They were not a species that could be reasoned with. They did not want trade or treaties. They wanted only to feed. Their ships looked like massive insects made of black metal, and they moved through space and clouds so thick they blocked out the stars. Every world they touched died. Every species they found became food. When the Krath turned toward Vela space, the leaders of Valinor sent messages to the Galactic Confederation. The Confederation was supposed to protect its members. That was the whole point of joining. The Velith had paid their dues for 3,000 years. They had shared their medicine and their knowledge freely. They had been perfect members. The response came within hours. Elder Sora, the oldest and wisest of the Velith leaders, read the message 3 times because she could not believe it. All Confederation personnel are ordered to evacuate Vela space immediately. The Valinor system has been classified as strategically non-viable. No military assistance will be provided. We wish the Velith people peace in their final days. That was it. No help was coming. 52 billion Velith had just been sentenced to death by a committee that had never even visited their world. Sora walked to her window and looked out at the capital city. Millions of her people were going about their daily lives, not yet knowing that the galaxy had abandoned them. Children were playing in the parks. Scholars were debating in the great halls. Healers were tending to the sick. None of them knew that in 3 weeks, the Krath would arrive and end everything. She began to weep. Far across the galaxy, in a sector that most species considered worthless, a small freighter called the Wanderer was carrying medical supplies to a human colony. The ship was old and dented, held together by repairs and stubbornness. Its captain was a young man named Taiho, who had spent the last 6 years hauling cargo through the forgotten corners of space. Taiho was not a hero. He was just a man trying to make enough money to keep his ship flying. He had a small crew of 3 people who had become his family. Yuna was his co-pilot, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind who could calculate jump coordinates faster than any computer. Dongwook was his engineer, a quiet man with gentle hands who could fix anything with enough time and tape. Hana was his medic, a former military doctor who had left the service after seeing too much death. They were nobodies. The galaxy did not know their names and did not care. Taiho was eating dinner alone in the cockpit when the distress call came through. It was weak, barely strong enough to reach his receiver. The voice was speaking in the common galactic language, but the accent was strange and musical. "This is Elder Sora of Valinor. Our world has been abandoned by the Confederation. The Krath swarm will arrive in 19 days. We have no weapons. We have no ships. We have 52 billion people who will die if no one helps us. Please, if anyone can hear this, we are begging you, please." The message repeated, and repeated, and repeated. Taiho sat very still. He knew about the Krath. Everyone did. They were the monsters that parents used to scare children into behaving. He also knew that no one ever survived a Krath attack. The smart thing to do was ignore the message and keep flying. He called his crew to the cockpit. Yuna listened to the message with her arms crossed. Her face showed nothing, but Taiho had known her long enough to see the anger in her eyes. Dongwook stood in the corner, his hand shaking slightly. Hana sat down slowly, her medical training making her think about 52 billion patients she could never save. "We are not soldiers," Yuna said finally. "We have no weapons. Our ship is held together by hope and wire. What could we possibly do?" "Die," Dongwook said quietly. "We could die with them." Hana looked at Taiho. "What do you want to do, Captain?" Taiho thought about his life. He had grown up poor on a colony world that the government had forgotten. When a plague hit his village, no help came. His mother had died holding his hand, asking him why no one cared about them. He had been 12 years old. He had spent his whole life running from that memory. Now it was catching up to him. "The galaxy left them to die," he said slowly. "Just like they left us. Just like they always leave the people who cannot fight back." He looked at his crew. "I am not asking you to come with me. This is my choice. But I am going to Valinor. Even if all I can do is hold one person's hand while they die, at least they will know that someone cared." Yuna was the first to speak. "You are an idiot," she said. Then she smiled. "I will plot the course." Dongwook nodded. "I will make sure the engines hold together long enough to get us there." Hana stood up and put her hand on Taiho's shoulder. "I did not become a doctor to let people die alone." The Wanderer changed course that night. 4 humans in a broken ship, flying toward a dying world because someone had asked for help and no one else had answered. It was foolish. It was hopeless. It was the most human thing they had ever done. 19 days away, Elder Sora kept sending her message into the void, no longer expecting an answer. She did not know that somewhere in the darkness, a small light was coming toward her. Hope has a way of finding people who have given up on it. The journey to Velna took 12 days. 12 days of jumping through empty space, burning fuel they could not afford, and eating food they had meant to sell. Nobody complained. Every night, they listened to Sora's message still repeating in the darkness. And every night, they flew a little faster. On the 13th day, they reached the edge of the Velna system. Yuna looked at her screens and went pale. Taiho, you need to see this. The Krath had arrived early. Their ships filled the space around the outer planets like a swarm of metal locusts. Thousands of them, maybe millions, moving in patterns that made no sense to human eyes. They had not reached Velna yet, but they were coming. The main fleet was 3 days away from the homeworld. We are too late, Dongwook whispered. No, Taiho said. We are just in time. 3 days is enough to save some of them. Plot a course to the planet. Take us in quiet. Yuna's hands moved across her controls. If we go in quiet, we will have to fly through the debris field. The Krath have already destroyed the outer colonies. There is wreckage everywhere. Then fly carefully. The Wanderers slipped through the darkness like a fish swimming through a river of death. All around them, pieces of destroyed stations and ships floated in the void. Some of them still had lights on. Some of them still had bodies inside. Hannah had to leave the cockpit because she could not stop crying. It took 6 hours to reach Velnor. The planet was beautiful. Blue oceans covered most of its surface, and the land was green with forests and fields. Great cities rose like silver towers along the coasts. From space, it looked like paradise. Taiho opened the communication channel. This is Captain Taiho of the human freighter Wanderer. We received your distress call. We are here to help. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a voice came through, the same musical voice from the message, but tired now. So very tired. Human vessel, this is Elder Sora. Please repeat your message. I do not think I heard you correctly. You heard me correctly, Elder. We are here to help. How can we assist with evacuation? More silence. When Sora spoke again, her voice was shaking. You came? But the Confederation said no one would come. They said we were not worth saving. Why would humans come here? Taiho did not know how to answer that question. He looked at his crew. Yuna shrugged. Dongwook looked at his feet. Hana came back into the cockpit, her eyes still red. Because you asked, Taiho said finally. Someone should have answered. He heard Sora crying through the communication channel. It was a strange sound, like wind chimes in rain. She cried for a long time, and Taiho let her. Sometimes people needed to cry before they could start hoping again. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger. There are 800,000 people in the capital city. Most of our transport ships were destroyed when the Krath attacked the outer colonies. We have been trying to evacuate by ground, but there is nowhere to go. The Krath will consume the entire planet. How many ships do you have left? Small ones. Personal vessels. Maybe enough to carry 50,000 people if we pack them tight. Taiho did the math in his head. 800,000 people. 50,000 could escape. 750,000 would die. Start loading those ships, he said. Get as many people out as you can. We will figure out the rest. Captain Taiho, your ship cannot carry 800,000 people. I know, but my ship is not the only ship that will come. Sora went quiet again. What do you mean? Taiho looked at Yuna. She nodded and started preparing a message. He looked at Dongwook, who was already pulling up communication frequencies. He looked at Hana, who was smiling for the first time in days. "I am going to call some friends," Taiho said. The message went out across human space. It did not go to Earth's government, because governments were slow and careful and would probably say no. It did not go to the military, because the military followed orders and the orders said to stay away. Instead, it went to the people who lived on the edges of civilization. The freighter captains who hauled cargo through dangerous space. The miners who dug for ore on airless moons. The colonists who would build homes on worlds nobody else wanted. People like Taiho. People who knew what it felt like to be forgotten. The message was simple. There are people dying out here. They asked for help. Nobody came. I am going anyway. If you have a ship, come find me. Coordinates attached. Then Taiho landed the Wanderer on Velinor and met Elder Sora for the first time. She was taller than he expected. Almost 3 meters, and her silver skin reflected the light of her planet's sun. Her eyes were deep purple and filled with tears. When she saw him step off his ship, she fell to her knees. "You are so small," she said. "Your species is so small, and you came all this way for us." Taiho helped her stand. "Size does not matter, Elder. Heart matters. And humans have big hearts, even if our bodies are little." Sora looked at the Wanderer, then at the sky where the Krath were coming. "Your ship cannot save us." "No," Taiho agreed. "But it can start. And where one human goes, others follow. That is what we do. We do not leave people behind." "Why?" Sora asked. "The Confederation has existed for 10,000 years. They left us. Why would humans, who have only been in space for 200 years, be different?" Taiho thought about his mother dying in a forgotten colony. He thought about all the times no one had come to help. He thought about how much that hurt. "Because we know what it feels like," he said. "We know what it feels like to scream into the darkness and hear nothing back. And we decided, a long time ago, that we would never let anyone else feel that way if we could stop it." Sora took his hand. Her fingers were long and cool, like holding silver branches. "Then let us begin," she said. "We have 3 days to save as many of my people as we can." Above them, in the darkness of space, the first human ship dropped out of hyperspace. Then another. Then 5 more. They were not warships. They were cargo haulers and mining vessels and passenger transports. They were held together by tape and prayer. But they came, because someone had asked for help, and humans always answered. The Krath came like a wave of darkness. Their ships poured into the system. Thousands upon thousands of black shapes moving in patterns that hurt to watch. They did not communicate. They did not send warnings. They simply advanced, and everything in their path died. The human fleet met them at the edge of Velinor's orbit. Jisoo fired the first shot. Her mining laser, designed to cut through asteroids, sliced across the hull of a Krath scout ship. The alien vessel broke apart in a shower of sparks and frozen fluid. For one moment, everyone in the human fleet held their breath. Then the Krath screamed out. It was not a sound that traveled through space. It was a signal, a radio wave that every ship received at once. It was the sound of rage and hunger and something that might have been surprise. The Krath had not expected resistance. They had never encountered resistance. Every species they had attacked had run or died, or both. Humans did neither. "All ships engage!" Taiho shouted into the communication channel. "Buy time for the evacuation. Every second counts." The battle was chaos. Mining ships dove into swarms of Krath fighters, their improvised weapons blazing. Cargo vessels rammed smaller enemy ships, their crews ejecting in escape pods at the last moment. The hospital ships stayed behind the lines, pulling damaged human vessels back for repairs while doctors worked on the wounded. Junho's transport ship took a hit early in the battle. Half his engines died, and his ship started drifting toward the planet's gravity well. Instead of abandoning ship, he pointed his nose at the nearest craft cruiser and fired his remaining thrusters. "Get those people off the surface," he shouted into his radio. "I will keep these things busy." His ship hit the cruiser at full speed. Both vessels disappeared in a ball of fire. When the explosion cleared, 3 more craft ships had been caught in the blast. On the planet below, the evacuation was a desperate scramble. Taiho had landed the Wanderer in the capital city's main square, loading Velith refugees as fast as possible. Yunus stayed on the bridge, coordinating with other ships. Dongwook ran between the cargo bay and the engines, fixing problems as they appeared. Hana triaged the refugees, separating the injured from the healthy, making impossible choices about who could wait and who needed help now. The Velith moved in terrified silence. They had never seen war. They had never heard explosions or smelled smoke or felt the ground shake from orbital bombardment. Many of them could not stop crying. Some had to be carried because their legs would not work anymore. Elder Sora stood in the middle of the chaos, directing her people with a calm voice that did not match her trembling hands. "The children go first," she said. "Then the elderly. Then everyone else. No exceptions." A young Velith mother pushed through the crowd, holding a baby wrapped in silver cloth. Her eyes were wild with fear. "Please," she begged. "Please save my daughter. She's only 3 months old. Please." Taiho took the baby from her arms. The child was so light, lighter than any human baby would be. Her eyes were closed, and she made a soft cooing sound that broke his heart. "I will get her to safety," he promised. "But you have to come too. There is room." The mother shook her head. "My husband is in the city. He went to find his parents. I cannot leave without him. There is no time. Then he will find me. Or he will not. But I will not leave him." She touched her daughter's face one last time. Tell her that her mother loved her. Tell her every day. She disappeared into the crowd before Taiho could stop her. Above the planet, the battle grew worse. Minho's yacht had been converted into an escape vessel, carrying 500 Velith refugees toward the jump point. A craft interceptor caught up to it halfway there. Minho had no weapons, no defenses, nothing but a fast engine and a desperate idea. He turned his ship around and flew straight at the interceptor. "What are you doing?" His crew screamed. "Buying time," Minho said. He did not die. At the last second, he pulled up, passing so close to the craft ship that his hull scraped against its surface. The interceptor tried to follow, but Minho was a better pilot than anyone had expected. He led the enemy ship on a chase through the debris field, dodging and weaving between the wreckage of the earlier battles. "Someone pick up my passengers," he shouted into the radio. "I will keep this thing busy." A cargo ship swooped in and collected the refugees from Minho's yacht, while he played cat and mouse with the KR-8 in orbit. A young pilot named Yunji flew her damaged shuttle toward a craft command ship. Her engines were failing. Her weapons were gone. Her life support was dying. She had maybe 10 minutes of air left. She could have ejected. She could have tried to reach another human ship. Instead, she pointed her nose at the command ship's bridge and pushed her throttle to maximum. "This is Yunji," she said into her radio. Her voice was calm and clear. "I am going to take out their flagship. Tell my family I love them. And tell the Velith that humans keep their promises." She started singing as she flew toward the enemy. It was a lullaby her grandmother used to sing, soft and sweet and full of love. The other human pilots heard it through their radios. Some of them cried. None of them looked away. Unji's shuttle hit the craft command ship at full speed. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. For a moment, the craft fleet hesitated. They had lost their flagship. They had lost their coordination. And the humans kept fighting. On the ground, Taiho heard the cheer go up from the human crews. He looked at the sky and saw the distant flash of Yunji's sacrifice. "Get everyone loaded," he said to his crew. "We are leaving in 5 minutes." "There are still people in the city," Hana said. "I know, but we cannot help them if we are dead. We have to get these people to safety first, then come back." The Wanderer lifted off with 300 Velith refugees packed into every available space. As they rose through the atmosphere, Taiho looked down at the capital city. It was burning now. The Krath had started their ground assault. He could see people running in the streets. People who would not escape. People who would die because there were not enough ships. "We will come back," he whispered. "I promise. We will come back." But he knew, even as he said it, that he might be lying. Some promises cannot be kept. Not because people do not try, but because the universe is cruel and time runs out. Above Valinor, the human fleet was dying. Ship by ship, they fell to the Krath swarm. But they did not run. They did not surrender. They fought for every second, for every refugee, for every chance, because that is what humans do. They stand. Even when standing means falling, they stand. The battle lasted 3 days. 3 days of fire and death and desperate hope. 3 days of human ships diving into swarms of enemies, buying seconds with their lives. 3 days of evacuation runs through storms of weapons fire, each trip carrying hundreds of Velith to safety. When it was over, 43 human ships remained from the original 127. 84 ships had been destroyed. Thousands of humans had died. They died in explosions and crashes and boarding actions. They died holding defensive lines and flying evacuation runs and simply refusing to give up. But 780,000 Velith were alive. The Krath had taken Valinor. The planet was dead now, consumed by the swarm. But the people had escaped. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough to rebuild. Enough to remember. Enough to carry their culture into the future. The surviving ships limped toward human space, their holds filled with refugees and their crews filled with grief. Taiho sat alone in the cockpit of the Wanderer, staring at the stars. He had not slept in 4 days. His hands were burned from helping repair damaged systems. His voice was raw from shouting orders and coordinates and encouragement. The baby was still with him. The little girl whose mother had disappeared into the burning city. He had kept her wrapped in his jacket through the whole battle, checking on her between evacuation runs, feeding her with medical supplies meant for adults. She had silver eyes, just like all Velith children. They looked at him with complete trust. He did not know her name. Her mother had never said, "I will call you Biol," he whispered to her. "It means star, because you are the brightest thing in all this darkness." Yuna found him there an hour later. She sat down next to him without speaking and looked at the sleeping child. "The other captains want to hold a memorial service," she said finally. "For everyone we lost. I know. They want you to speak." Taiho shook his head. "I am not a speaker. I am just a freighter captain. You are the man who stood up when no one else would. You are the man who sent the message that brought us all together. You are the reason 700,000 people are alive right now instead of dead." Yuna's voice was gentle but firm. "You have to speak. They need to hear from you." The memorial was held on a small moon in human space. The surviving ships gathered in orbit, and everyone who could walk assembled in a cargo bay that had been cleared for the occasion. The Velith refugees stood together, their silver faces marked with grief and gratitude. Human crews stood beside them, dirty and tired and proud. Elder Sora spoke first. 3 weeks ago, I sent a message into the darkness," she said. Her voice was steady, but tears ran down her silver cheeks. I did not expect an answer. The Galactic Confederation had abandoned us. We were alone. We were dying. We were dying. She looked at the humans in the crowd. And then you came. You came in your old ships and your patched clothes and your beautiful, stubborn hearts. You came for strangers. You died for people you had never met. You fought for a species that could offer you nothing in return. Her voice broke. Why? We asked ourselves that question over and over. Why would anyone do this? And then we realized something. You did not do it for reward or recognition. You did it because it was right. Because someone asked for help, and you could not bring yourselves to say no. She fell to her knees, a gesture of deepest respect in Velith culture. We will never forget. For as long as Velith exists in this universe, we will remember the humans who stood beside us when no one else would. Then Tahoe spoke. He walked to the front of the crowd slowly, still holding little Buell in his arms. He looked at the faces around him, human and Velith alike, and felt something he had not felt in years. Pride. I am not good with words, he said. I am just a man who flies a freighter and tries to pay his bills. I am not a hero. I am not a leader. I am just someone who heard a cry for help and could not ignore it. He looked at the stars through the cargo bay's window. We lost a lot of good people. Yunji, who flew her shuttle into an enemy flagship. Junho, who rammed a cruiser to protect an evacuation route. Hundreds of others whose names I never learned, but whose courage I will never forget. He looked at his crew. At Yuna, who had not slept in days. At Dongwook, whose hands were covered in bandages from all his repairs. At Hannah, who had saved more lives than she could count. They did not die for glory or medals. They died for the same reason we all came here. Because someone was in trouble. Because no one else would help. Because that is what humans do. He held up Bio, who was awake now, her silver eyes reflecting the lights of the cargo bay. This little girl does not have a name. Her mother gave her to me and walked into a burning city to find her husband. I do not know if she survived, but I know that this child will grow up knowing two things. She will know that she was loved enough to be saved, and she will know that when the galaxy abandoned her people, humanity stood beside them. He looked at the crowd one last time. We cannot save everyone. We cannot fix the universe, but we can choose every day to be the kind of people who try. That is all any of us can do. And that is enough. 3 months later, the Galactic Confederation called an emergency council meeting. Species from across the galaxy had been talking about what happened at Velinor. The story had spread everywhere. A tiny species called humanity, barely 200 years in space, had defied the most powerful government in existence to save strangers. The Confederation had expected the other species to be angry at the humans for breaking the rules. Instead, they were angry at the Confederation for having such rules in the first place. Elder Sora addressed the council. For 3,000 years, the Velith believed that civilization meant order and power and careful neutrality, she said. We were wrong. Civilization is not about protecting the strong from inconvenience. It is about protecting the weak from destruction. She pointed at the human delegation, a small group of freighter captains and columnists who looked completely out of place among the ancient powers of the galaxy. These humans taught us what civilization really means. They came to us with nothing but old ships and open hearts. They bled for strangers. They died for people they had never met. If this is what humanity is, then we have been measuring worth by all the wrong standards for 10,000 years. The vote that followed changed everything. Humanity did not join the Confederation as applicants. They joined as equals. And when they took their seats at the council table, the Velith stood beside them. 5 years later, a memorial was built on a small moon in human space. It listed the names of every human who had died at Velinor. At the top of the memorial, carved in both human letters and Veloth script, were the words, "They came when no one else would. They stayed when staying meant dying. They were human." May we all learn what that means. Taiho visited the memorial every year on the anniversary. He brought Buell with him, who was not so little anymore. She could walk now and talk and ask questions about everything she saw. Was my mother brave? She asked him one year. Taiho knelt down and looked into her silver eyes. "Your mother was the bravest person I ever met," he said. "She gave you to a stranger because she loved you enough to let you go. That is the hardest kind of courage there is. And you saved me." I tried. A lot of us tried. He looked at the names on the memorial wall. We did not save everyone, but we saved enough. And sometimes that is all you can do. Buell took his hand and looked at the stars. "When I grow up," she said, "I want to be like you. I want to help people who need help." Taiho smiled. "Then you will, because that is what family does." They stood together in the starlight, a human and a Veloth, father and daughter in every way that mattered. And somewhere in the universe, someone else was sending a cry for help into the darkness. And somewhere, humans were already on their way, because that is what they do. That is what makes them human, always.